Hi everyone, it's Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'll be sharing how to create this creepy comic book zombie card. I started out with a piece of cardstock that measures 4¼ by 5½. I smushed some sage ink onto my silicone mat and spritzed it with water, and then grabbed a piece of acetate and just smushed that onto my cardstock. Next, I used hot tub ink and used the same piece of acetate after I cleaned off the sage ink to smear and smoosh more ink on the cardstock. It seems that ink smushing with acetate is a thing for me at the moment, but I really liked how these two colors mixed together, and I thought it would be an easy way to add color to the zombie faces without actually having to color all of the zombie faces. So I continued with smushing the ink using the piece of acetate until I was happy with the coverage. I made sure to let that panel dry completely before I splattered some pink ink on there. And I added the pink just so it would brighten it up a little bit. I thought that it would be an unexpected surprise. I used my heat tool to make sure that the panel was dry after I did the splatters with the pink. And then I inked up the zombie faces background stamp with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamped it on my ink smushed panel. I set that panel aside and started to work on my comic book cover. I stamped the comic book cover stamp using VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto a piece of gray cardstock that measures 4¼ by 5½. And I did stamp this image a couple of times just to make sure that I got a nice crisp impression. I decided I wanted to add some texture to the front of my comic book cover, so I used the brick pattern stencil and a gray ink pad. And when I first did the stenciling, I kind of left spots open. I didn't have the brick all over, but decided later on that I needed to add more brick. So I just laid the stencil back on my panel and just added a little bit more of the brick pattern. So I wanted to cut out the center of my comic book cover, and I find the easiest way to do that is to draw an X from corner to corner on whatever part you want to cut out using a craft knife. Then you can bend up those triangles and use your scissors to start cutting out that center portion. While I'm doing this fussy cutting, you'll notice that I move the cardstock more than I move the scissors. And I also don't close the blades all the way. I just do tiny little cuts as I'm moving the cardstock around, and that helps maintain a nice smooth cut. And in this case, I was cutting very, very close to the actual stamped line. Now, I didn't get a perfect cut. I do have a couple of lumps and bumps and raggedy edges here and there, which I can come back in with either a craft knife to clean it up, or I can come back in with my scissors to clean them up just a little bit more. But then to really finish it off, I used a black marker and colored around that edge from the back side. And the reason that I like to do it from the back side is if my marker slips, it's going to slip on the back and not across the front of the stamped image. Once I had that center window cut out, I decided to color in the letters for the word comics. And I didn't do anything fancy. I just used one marker, and after I finished coloring in the S, I wasn't sure if I liked the color, but I decided that I'm gonna keep going because I know that once the ink settles in and dries, that it's probably gonna fade back a little bit, especially because the cardstock that I'm using is not necessarily Copic paper. After I was done coloring in the word comics, I used a white gel pen and colored in the little comic bubbly thing behind the price up in the top right corner, and then I highlighted what edition this comic book is, and then I added a few white detail highlights to the word comics. Once I was done adding the highlights with the white gel pen, I ran that panel through my die cutting machine with a wonky stitched rectangle die. And I had also cut down the panel of the zombie faces background, so I had just enough to fill in that burst on the front of the comic book cover. To make sure that I got good adhesion of my zombie faces background, I used liquid glue and went around the edge of the cutout part, and then I used my tape runner to adhere the whole thing to the front of a top folding A2 sized black note card. And I still have enough left over from my zombie faces background so that I could create a second card. And that's it. That finishes up my video for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, we'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.